Hello, my name is Bill Isenhart. I'm the repair tech at Martin Music in Newark, Ohio. And today I'm going to talk about what holds the keys on your instrument and things that you need to know about those to keep the keys from falling off. There are posts all over every woodwind instrument: flutes, clarinets, saxophones, oboes, bassoons. And in between these posts, the key is suspended. It's either held by a long rod that goes through one post, through the key tube, and threads into the second post. That's a rod. Or it could be just a pivot screw, a short screw that just goes in and sticks into the end of the key tube. There'll be one in both ends of the key tube, one from either post. I'll have threads in both sides. So the thing you need to know first is the difference between a rod and a pivot screw. If you see something coming out of a rod, you think a screw or a rod is loose, you can turn it out just a little bit with a screwdriver. If you see threads in it immediately, that means it's a pivot screw. There are basically two different kinds of pivot screws, some with heads on them, some with no heads. The ones with heads on them normally can be screwed in fairly snugly. I wouldn't get overly vicious, but just nice and snug. Anytime you tighten a pivot screw, you always wiggle the key that is holding to make sure it's not locking it up. The ones with no heads, you can generally tighten those up and it will lock the key. It will go right in and pinch the key tube. And all you need to do is back it out a quarter of a turn. These will normally stay in pretty well just by tightening them down. Normally the ones with no heads, they put lock thread on them, which is little stuff like this. This is Thread Locker Blue, and this Loctite can be bought at any hardware store. And that's something you need if you have pivot screws with no heads on them. It'll hold them in place. There are some rods which are a rod, and on the end of the rod is a pivot screw. So there'll be a post here, the rod goes through the key tube, there'll be a post here, the rod sticks through that post and into the next key. There's one key on a clarinet and one key on a flute that is like that. Every flute player needs to know about their C rod. This rod right here that goes from this post through the C key, through this post, and then there's a pivot end, a small pointy end that sticks in the top, the B flat key here. So when you watch, when I loosen this C rod, you will see, there we go, this key is going to pop out of there in just a second. There it goes. So this key is now loose, and the C rod goes all the way through. So I can take the C rod all the way out. It should stay in place. If it doesn't stay in place, it can be several things. Number one, you can have some gunk or dirt or on the C rod, so it is sticking to the key. So when you're working the key, the rod is turning and eventually comes loose. So the first thing I would do is stick a pipe cleaner through the key tube, clean that out, wipe this off with a paper towel, put some fresh oil on that, and put it back together. So I put my C key back on there. If this continues to get loose and it causes problems a lot, you can put a little lock thread on the threads on the end here. You got to be careful. Do not get lock thread on where it touches the key, because you can lock the key. Do not dump it all over the rod. If you get it all over the place, it'll go in there and the rod will be locked to the post, which you don't want. All you want is a small amount right on the threads, and you must let it dry. If you have a bunch of liquid lock thread on there and you shove it through the key tube, it will coat the inside of the tube with lock thread and lock the rod to it. So you don't want to do that. You probably don't need anything, but if it is a consistent problem, put a small amount of lock thread on the threads, let it dry, probably 10 minutes, then carefully put the rod back in. You can get a set of screwdrivers and odd lots for $2 and pick one or two that are the right size. I probably wouldn't keep them in my case because they'll rattle around and scratch your instrument, but keep them handy at home. So now when I turn this rod, it's going to go in there and hold that key. Alright, see, you notice it's moving. That's not good. That's not a good thing that's moving like that. Okay, if I go in nice and tight, aha, this key is locked. it won't go up and down until I turn this back. So you just want to do it enough so it becomes free. Okay, I'm going to rehook the springs. And 3 springs on there. Aha, it's still not working. Going to back it out just a little more. There it goes. So when this becomes loose, you'll see this key start to wobble around, and that's not good. It will not seat correctly on there. So there, it's fine. Everything's good. This is a spring hook. It's a thing you can buy professionally. You don't really need it. If you can get a small crochet hook, I've made these for several people. I take a file and cut a little groove in there, and that is for pushing the spring back over its little catch. There's also a little hook, so sometimes I can grab a spring and pull it to rehook it. Every key on a woodwind has a little spring, either a wire spring or a flat spring, that either holds the key off the flute like this one, or holds the key on the flute like this one. And so when you're polishing your flute, if you unhook one of those springs, which is real easy to do, then your key won't stay up, and you have to hook it back on.